That's the wall behind my desk, and it's a little plain. I think it deserves better. So this is how I made it look like that. Oh, Jesus. Hi, I'm Tim Belcher, and welcome back to the channel. It's been a minute since I've posted. Between moving shops and then Hurricane Ian, life sort of got in the way. But I'm back and have a lot of content and projects coming, so I hope to see you all back here. While I prep this wall and clean out this area, let me tell you a little about this project. The wall is a mildly textured wall, common in Florida. It had the center, left, and right channels of a 5.1 audio setup with the rear speakers in the ceiling. And given the cabling setup, I'd imagine it would be common to have a media center here with a large amp. I want it clean Florida ceiling, so I'll be covering this wall in Barnwood or pseudo Shiplap. I'll be replacing these speakers with in-wall units for a clean look. I'll put a new larger gaming television in, adding some LED lights and some floating shelves. It's important that I find all the studs in this wall, not only for the Barnwood, but I'll also need to find locations for those 3 in-wall speakers. Now that I've got the studs marked, I need to find the center of the wall. And once I find that center, I'll then try and find a location for that center speaker. If the speakers and the television have to shift right based on the studs, that's fine, as this will shift the television closer to the center of the room. For 3 speakers, I'll trace a level line across the wall, and then using the mounting template for the speakers, I'll choose a location for the center. And once I have the center speaker, I need to choose locations for the left and right that fit within the studs and are equal distance from the center speaker. Unfortunately for this wall, that means the speakers will be close together. It'll still work fine for this room, certainly better than a sound bar would provide. And in this small space, the separation is certainly good enough. I'm going to take my time with the drywall saw, making sure mostly that my horizontal cuts are directly on the line I traced. The speakers can adjust somewhat in the holes provided, but a little care here didn't hurt. Onto the Barnwood, and I chose this product called Skinnies from the Home Depot in white. It was about $60 for 6 planks, and that'll cover about 10.5 square feet, so somewhere around $5.50 per square foot. Not cheap, no affiliate link or recommendation here, this is just what I chose. I found the product perfectly usable, but nothing to write home about. There are dozens of products I'm sure would substitute in just fine. I have to say I had a lot of anxiety about this first row. Many people will tell you the first row is critical to the rest of the project. I checked and nothing on this wall was level or square. The Skinnies boards were about 1/3 of an inch thick, and I thought they looked fine directly over the existing baseboards. Some people will tell you need to remove the baseboards and reinstall them afterwards. My baseboards were close enough to level that I just went with them. Also, there seems to be some debate on using construction adhesive, and I think it has to do with making it easier to remove. However, this is a textured wall, and I'm certainly going to use construction adhesive for a good grip. And throughout this part of the project, you're going to see me shooting brads at a downward and upward angle. If you shoot them all in straight, there's very little force keeping the boards flat against the wall as the adhesive dries. But if you shoot the top brad down and the bottom brad up at angles, it makes it much more difficult for the boards to pull away. Here is my first mistake. I should have made sure that my first row did not end in a small piece. The length of 2 full boards left this small gap at the end. It's fine, it's not noticeable, but from here on out, I just made sure I started with a board that was either at least 1 foot long or trimmed by a foot to make sure I did not start or end with a small piece. You may notice I'm covering these empty receptacles. I think the remnants from the sound system that I just don't need. This is one of the most complex boards of the project, spanning a low voltage receptacle, a double wide speaker jack setup, and an electrical outlet in one board. Really though, it's fairly simple. I just laid out the board in place as it would go and marked the sides of the boxes. I then took measurements in place from the board below to the bottom and the top of each box and moved those measurements to the board. I could then square them up and use a multi-tool to cut out the holes. These don't need to be perfect, as plates will hide any mess you leave behind, but I took my time and tried to make them as neat as possible. Every time I get the multi-tool out, I feel like I get good at using it right as I finish. So these were cut so that the very top and bottom of the outlets will land against the wood, while still leaving enough room to get the screw into the outlet itself. and this will flatten them down against the wood and leave just enough room for a flush trim plate. With that part done, I've got a free run all the way to the speaker holes. And as that happened, there was a bit of luck here, and I didn't need to cut out boards for the bottom of the speaker holes, as the height of the boards gave me a perfect fit for the bottom of the speakers. And that let me just chop boards to width to fill in the gaps here. Not so lucky on the top, but marking and trimming these were pretty simple. One thing I realized I'm not showing you in this video is the chop saw work. It was normal chop saw work, very repetitive, and in general I would take a piece I was going to cut and place it above the gap I needed to fill, push it firmly against the wall, and make a mark. I'd then try to keep that mark at the chop saw. Sometimes I did this in one try, and others took me maybe 5 or 6 before I got the fit I wanted. A few times I would cut too short and have to use that board in another part of the project. Normal, simple stuff for anyone with a bit of DIY experience. And here's a little bit of how that went on this open section. Okay, so we finally get to this corner, or this area where the ceiling angles in, and it was too tight for me to use any of my angle gauges, so I just used some folded paper to make a template. I could then transfer that template to a board and use a jigsaw to cut it out. And I actually repeated something similar to this for all the boards that needed that angle, just using some folded paper and tracing it onto each board. The final board, however, was complicated enough that I actually had to resort to measuring. I simply transcribed the measurements onto the back of a board, sort of in a mirrored fashion, and cut it out. It took me 2 tries to get it right. Okay, and we're done with the Barnwood. Overall, fairly simple but time-consuming, and it took me the better part of 2 days. Let's mount those speakers. These are Micca 8-inch in-wall speakers, the 8-inch referring to the size of the woofer. Mine cost me about $55 each. For speakers, not very expensive, but I have to say the sound is impressive. They're paintable, but I actually want them in white. They have these mounting clamps that you manually spin inward to put them in the wall, and then as you tighten the screws, those clamps spin behind the drywall and tighten. I could just reach in the wall and reroute the existing speaker wires, and voila, in-wall speakers. I spent a little time cleaning up the receptacles, and then I fixed the television mount centered with the correct distance above that center channel speaker. And once that was centered and leveled, the last bit of cleanup was to reattach this power and low voltage box. Before I mount the TV, I'm going to install 5 floating shelves of different lengths. And I want to know where to install them, so I'm going to measure and mark out the TV with some tape. I wanted a clean gray floating shelf. Actually, I wanted live edge slab floating shelves, but I also wanted them gray. Look around enough and it can surprise you what you can find. I found these solid acacia shelves with a faux live edge on Amazon. Sort of expensive, and like the skinnies, I found them perfectly usable, but not so outstanding that I would recommend them to others. They're heavy, and many users find they sag a bit. I simply placed small, thin washers behind the bracket on the bottom under each of the mounts to compensate, and mine came out perfect. I placed one of the medium shelves lower on the wall, just above the speaker and low voltage outlets, and on the shelf I drilled 1.5-inch holes to pass through cables, and I think the result's pretty clean. Certainly more minimal than a media console. And finally, the TV. This is a 65-inch LG OLED TV meant for high-performance gaming. And I got mine on a Black Friday sale, which now, even several months later, is still about $500 off of retail. It may seem expensive, but this is a beast of a television. And before I mount it, I'm going to apply an LED light strip to the back. And this is one of those areas where you have dozens of choices. If you want to go more expensive with individually addressable LEDs, where you can create custom scenes or even dynamically adjust the colors depending on what's on the screen, I'd certainly recommend something like GoVee. It has a lot of user support. This is something I may revisit, but for now though, I just wanted simple backlighting, so I went with these much less expensive DayBetter Bluetooth controlled LED strips. The app is very usable, very simple, and inexpensive. I simply used double-sided adhesive to mount the controller and then 3 wraps around the TV. This has a simple remote, but also really works well with Bluetooth. Then I can enlist my crew to help me mount it, put the speaker grates on, and with that, we're done with this project. Before I get to the before and after shots, I do want to show you one more purchase I made for this setup, mostly because I found it unique and I had never seen anything like it before. With a 5.1 stereo, you're effectively constrained to a large amp or receiver, a large Sony, a JVC, or something similar to drive these speakers. I wanted a clean, minimal look, an Apple TV and Xbox, and that's it. So check this little guy out, made by Pyle USA. It's not much bigger than an Apple TV itself and is a full 100 watt amp with 2 HDMI input ports and 1 HDMI out. Super clean, super small, and super inexpensive. It does say Pyle USA, but I'm thinking probably not.
The Bluetooth device is connected successfully.
For me, it's really rare that I complete a project and it comes out exactly as I'd planned it. And this one's very, very close. I'm very happy with the end result, and I hope this project gives you some ideas for something similar. If it did, please hit that like and subscribe for more. And as always, thanks for watching.